Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to do a review of the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy. It was called All the Worlds a Stage. And as it begins, we find the real Admiral Janeway speaking with the diviner, who seems to be having some kind of memory loss, which isn't total because he does seem to remember his daughter being taken, and he remembers the protostar as well as Chakotay. And when Janeway learns that the one officer at the relay station escaped, she realizes that she needs to find him to get his help tracking the protostar. I'm wondering if the diviner is actually having memory loss or if he's feigning that whole thing. That will be revealed later, I guess. It turns out that our intrepid crew has been trying various things to get rid of the weapon on the ship, but they can't. And it also turns out that Murph is under the weather. Most of the crew beams down to an M-class planet to investigate a distress call, and they encounter a couple of guys who think themselves Captain Kirk and Sulu, which is said Sul-U, and who even talk like them, which was hilarious, dressed in makeshift uniforms of an entity that they refer to as Starflight, which hologram Janeway doesn't understand because there is no record of a first contact with this planet. Apparently, they live in a structure that they call New Enterprise, with a whole bunch of people who also fancy themselves Starflight officers and who say things like live logs and prosper. We interrupt this episode breakdown and review for the following message. Hey, you, right there. I see you reaching to click out of this video. You're only like 2 minutes in, if that. Stop it. Watch the rest of the video. And if you can't watch the rest of the video, just watch a little bit more, will you? Maybe get to the halfway point. I'm getting views on my channel, but everybody's bailing in the first minute of the video. I mean, I know I'm not much to look at, but I'm not that ugly. So stop it. Keep watching the video. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel, for crying out loud. Okay, now back to the video. We now return you to the video in progress. Apparently, they also have someone in their community called Dr. Boons. They put on a little show for our crew in which they demonstrate knowledge of KIRK and SPOCK, which they acquired when an ensign who they called Ensign fell from the sky and warned them about an evil called the Gallows, which is a curse that poisons their lands and apparently makes them sick. When Dahl catches the sickness, the crew has to go to the source to figure out a way to synthesize a cure. The crew then calls Rock to come down with EV suits so that they can accomplish this, which she has to do because interference makes transporting difficult. There's some interference from whatever's going on the planet. According to the doctor, his people know that they're not really Starfleet, but they live the way they do because they're trying to live up to Starfleet ideals, which they learned from the ensign, which they very much admire. It turns out that the Gallows is the shuttlecraft Galileo from the Enterprise, which crash landed there on the planet at some point. Apparently, it's leaking plasma, and the plasma is leaking into the ground of this cavern that it crashed in, which is full of dilithium, and it's reacting with it and causing all kinds of weirdness. Pog is able to use the shuttle's communications equipment to communicate with Zero when their comm badges won't work, who is then able to figure out how to synthesize an antidote. The protostar has to be flown in closer to where half of the crew is, which is stuck in the cavern with the shuttle. But with half the crew not on the ship, Dahl has to improvise. And he goes back to the ship with 3 people from the planet who he thinks would be able to help fly the ship since they're so enamored with Starfleet and everything, which it turns out they can, but only after Janeway lays a holographic skin over the protostar bridge so that it looks and functions like a 23rd century Constellation class ship, which was really cool. While falling to the bottom of the cavern in the shuttle, a falling piece of debris activates the log playback of Ensign Garavik, who details what happened to him when he crash landed there. Now, Ensign Garavik is the young man who was in the episode of the original series about the vampire cloud, in which we learn that this cloud was encountered by the Farragut before it was encountered by the Enterprise when Kirk was serving on the Farragut with Ensign Garrigut's father, who was the captain. So it was a huge Easter egg, not only the ship, but this character who in that one episode, the only one he ever appears in to my recollection, doesn't leave the ship in the shuttle at the end. So that must have happened at some future point, and they just picked this random ensign. But it's pretty cool. It's a really cool Easter egg. The protostar is able to get inside the cavern and rescue the crew, after which the crew leaves the natives some medical equipment on the idea that it's more of a second contact than a first contact, and they don't really, they're not as constrained by the Prime Directive and teaches them the proper way to do the Vulcan salute. And Dahl recognizes the parallel between his crew, which aren't really Starfleet either, but which are trying to emulate Starfleet and do good, and the natives who are doing that same thing, even if they don't always get the details exactly right. So I thought that was really cool because our crew has come a long way since the beginning of the season. And it was cool for them to come across some other people that are kind of on the same path as them, and that needed a little bit of fine tuning as well, to move closer to being on the correct path to, to doing things the Starfleet way. So I thought it was really cool. Before the episode ends, we see that Murph isn't so much sick as in some stage of metamorphosis, as evidenced by him concocting himself against a wall in sickbay. So I really enjoyed this episode. Again, it kind of plays fast and loose with some things like, how did Zero know how to synthesize a cure just because Pog tells him, oh, by the way, it's plasma interacting with dilithium? You wouldn't think that would be enough for them to figure out how to cure the thing, but they do just from that. So that was a little bit of a shortcut that they took for the sake of, their main audience, which is supposed to be kids. But again, I thought this was a really good episode. The people on the planet could have been anybody. They didn't have to be a group of people that are emulating Starfleet, and the rest of the story would have worked because it's essentially about the crew helping them with something that's, affecting them adversely that they don't really understand. So it could have been anything, but they stepped it up by making it a vestige of, prior Star Trek that was behind everything that was going on. And I thought that was cool because, we've seen cases of this before, if I'm not mistaken, where societies are very impressionable and they emulate things that happen to them, like that planet in the original series where they followed, the dictates of a novel that was about Gangland, Chicago, or Gangland, New York, and, stuff like that. So I thought it was cool that yet again, we're seeing that, there are societies out there that are very impressionable. And of course, it's hilarious that they had the guy emulating the way William Shatner talks and the way George Takei talks. And, the crazy names they came up with, stuff like Sprock and Dr. Boone's. Just great. Of course, some of that's going to go over if not all of it, is going to go over the heads of the younger audience. But for us, we get it, and it's hilarious. And it was great to see the Galileo again. That was really cool. So, speaking of the Galileo, you can see the original set piece that was used on the show in Ticonderoga now at the Star Trek set tour, original series set tour. It was restored a while back by some folks that found it like in a junkyard or whatever, and now it's on loan, I guess, to the Ticonderoga original series set tour. So you can actually go and see it. It wasn't there when I went, which is a bummer, but anyway, little side note for you there. But yeah, that's it for this episode. I thought it was really good. I continue to think the show is excellent, and I will be back to review the next episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.